If you clicked on this video, you have probably heard of the term high concept idea, maybe from a writing class or even from an agent. And in this video, I'm going to explain to you what a high concept idea is and why it's so important to have your idea be high concept if you want the highest probability of selling your book or having an agent sign you from your book. I'm not saying you have to have a high concept idea in order to get an agent, but I am saying that it absolutely helps. A high concept idea is a story idea that can be pitched in 1 or 2 sentences. It has a strong original premise that makes people wonder why it hasn't been done before. It's very simple, and it leaves a very lasting impression on the person reading it. Usually a high concept pitch will apply some sort of really original twist to a story that has been done before. A high concept idea is essentially an idea that can be summed up in 1 to 2 lines, but it's a little more complicated than that. And just because a story can be summed up in 1 to 2 lines doesn't mean it's interesting. I could say an alcoholic and a emotionally manipulative woman have a turbulent love affair. That is not a high concept idea, even though it can be summed up in 1 to 2 sentences. I like to think of high concept ideas as ideas that are easy to pitch in 1 sentence and leave a clear and lasting impression on the listener. A high concept will make someone want to read the book based on the premise alone. It will be visual and allow people to picture exactly what the stakes of this book will be, as well as get a very clear feel for what the book is going to be like. The example I just gave you was an alcoholic and an emotionally manipulative woman fall in love and pursue a turbulent love affair. Compare that with this high concept pitch for The Hunger Games. Teens are forced to fight to the death on live TV. It gives you an idea of the stakes, it gives you an idea of what kind of scenes will be in the book. It's a very shocking and memorable concept. Or this high concept pitch for Jurassic Park. What if scientists cloned dinosaurs and created a theme park? The idea of a theme park is familiar, but a theme park filled with dinosaurs is very shocking and it's very memorable. A lot of high concept pitches will be formatted as what if questions, like what if you could bring dinosaurs back to life and put them all in a theme park? Or you can structure it as X meets Y, like, I don't know, Star Wars meets Knives Out. This would tell us that it probably takes place in space, or there's some sort of spaceship, and it's also a murder mystery and follows some sort of detective. An article I really like from Writer's Digest explains a couple of different ways that you can structure your high concept pitches. The article reads, "It's a buddy cop story but with blank," or to phrase it as a what if question, what if 2 diametrically opposed cops were suddenly placed in a totally new and unexpected situation? This gives you a clear idea of who the characters are, what the stakes are, and will give the person reading the pitch kind of a snapshot of what it's about. It's a teen girl's first romance story but with blank. This has to be something interesting, something exciting, not like it's a teen girl's first romance story, but it also has a first kiss in it. Like, obviously, what if a teen girl suddenly met someone totally unlike anyone you would expect in a teen romance story, and they did something totally unexpected? It has to be memorable. There has to be a twist. It can't just be extremely predictable. That is not a high concept story. You can also phrase it as X meets X, such as it's Breaking Bad meets Outlander, but also includes the very important point that if you say it's Harry Potter meets The Hunger Games, that's not going to give people a very clear idea of what your story is. You don't want to promise to live up to like The Hunger Games and then fall short of it. Also, people tend not to believe if you say your book is like The Hunger Games or Harry Potter, they'll be like, yeah, right. And they're not incredibly descriptive, so you should be more specific. It's Ferris Bueller's Day Off meets Firefly. This tells us that it's funny, but probably has serious themes and probably takes place in space. So every high concept idea has to be short, it has to be memorable, and it has to include something unexpected. The more shocking and unexpected, the closer you will be to having a high concept pitch. So why is it important to have a high concept idea? High concept ideas are much easier to pitch to agents because they are more commercial and they are easier to sell. Think about it. If you're browsing a bookstore and you're trying to find something to read, what grabs your attention more? A story about the alcoholic falling in love with the emotionally unavailable woman? and that's all the information that you get, or the story that's pitched as teenagers fight to the death on live television. Maybe that book about the love story is really interesting, but the one about the fight to the death is attention grabbing, it's shocking. You can already kind of picture what the setting is going to be and what kind of things are going to be happening and what the stakes are going to be if these teens are fighting to the death. Whereas you can't picture that the same way when it's as vague as it is in that romance one. The more specific you can get with it, the better, but you have to stay specific and simple. You can have a very high concept romance, like, I don't know, a girl falls in love with a boy, except she finds out that he's a vampire and wants to eat her. That is high concept because it's shocking and memorable, and it's more interesting than the one just about the alcoholic and the emotionally unavailable woman. Not every idea is high concept. Your idea is really either high concept or it's not. It's hard to take a book that is not high concept and pitch it as high concept because the simplicity usually has to come from the idea stage. But sometimes you write a high concept book and you don't know it's high concept until you pitch it, and in which case that's a very good problem to have. So it's good to have a high concept idea when trying to grab an agent, especially as a new author, because a high concept pitch is more likely to get their attention in the query email. And if you execute it well, that is a much more commercially viable manuscript compared to a manuscript the agent either didn't read because the pitch was too confusing and didn't grab their attention, or a book that might have been high concept but just very poorly executed, the agent didn't want. So how do you go about creating a high concept idea or a high concept pitch? If you've written a manuscript and you know it's not high concept, but maybe you see potential for it to become high concept and that's something that you want to do, coming up with a pitch can be a very useful way to figure out what your story actually is and revise accordingly. Like, I had a manuscript that I wrote that kind of went all over the place in a bunch of different directions, and when I forced myself to sit down and figure out like who the characters were and what the central conflict is and what the stakes were, I figured out the story was actually about a completely different thing than it spent a lot of its time doing, and that allowed me to revise and make it a lot better. The tried and true formula for writing a high concept pitch is your character plus your conflict plus your twist. I usually start with the words what if just to get myself going, and then I can revise it afterwards. So an example would be if you were writing a book maybe about time travelers that had to go back in time and stop a certain person from being born in order to save the world. So it's kind of historical fiction and also time traveling fiction. Your character would be your time travelers. Your conflict would be to stop that person from being born. And the stakes would be save their parents' marriage. Maybe instead of save the world, because save the world is kind of vague. So a high concept pitch could be, what if a young time traveler had to prevent the birth of his mother's future affair to save his parents' marriage? Then you can get rid of the what if, and you can play around with the phrasing and turn that into a young time traveler has to save his parents' marriage by going back in time to prevent the birth of the man his mother had an affair with. This is simple, this is clear, it's catchy, it's memorable. Adding those three things together usually gets you to a sort of framework for an idea, and then if you're coming up with new ideas, you can kind of use this strategy to create new ideas, or if you're revising a book that you've already written, you can put the elements of the book that you've written into this structure and then boil it down and see if your idea actually is high concept or not. You don't need to have a high concept idea in order to get an agent and to have a successful book. Not every idea has to be high concept. There are a ton of movies out there that are low concept ideas, and these movies can do very well, but I have personally found that lower concept movies that are more about like, a girl grows up and comes of age over a period of time is interesting, but whether or not I want to see it is not so much dependent on the concept as it is dependent on the execution. And so in order for me to really want to pick that up or see it, I usually have to know the filmmaker or know the actor, or in this case, know the author. If we're talking about books, there has to be another reason for me to pick up that book if it's a low concept idea. Whereas a high concept idea, if it sticks with me and it affects my imagination in some way, I'm going to want to pick that book up just based on the concept alone, and maybe take a risk on a newer author just because I want to see how they're able to have the story play out. That's it for this video on high concept ideas. I hope this video is helpful to you. If you have a second, I'd be super grateful if you could like this video and subscribe to my channel. My name is Claire Fraze, and I'm an award-winning author who makes videos sharing actionable writing tips that helped me make my own writing better. Do you think the book you're working on is a high concept idea? If so, drop your pitch down in the comments below. I would love to read them. By far, my favorite comments to read are the ones where people pitch their story ideas. And so if you have a story that you're working on, whether it's high concept or low concept, drop it in the comment section below because I would love to read it. I hope you have a good week, everyone. And as always, happy writing.